Welcome back to Tyfano, the podcast where we explore the real-world impact of data, AI and analytics. I'm your host, Paul Alexander, CEO of Beyond Putting Data to Work, where we help organisations put data to work to drive value and transformation. As you can probably see from the background, I'm in a different location to usual. I'm currently in the fantastic city of Colombo in Sri Lanka. Today we're speaking to someone at the heart of the UK's data and analytics community, David Reed, editor of DataIQ. Every year, DataIQ publishes the DataIQ 100, a definitive list of the most influential people in data, drawn from all the sectors such as retail, finance, government and healthcare, and also supply-side experts such as me. But this isn't just a who's who. It's actually a mirror held up to the evolution of leadership in our space. What does it take to lead in data today? What qualities are rising to the top and what's falling away? David joins us to unpick the trends, the traits and the implications for every organisation trying to build better with data. David, thank you for coming along today. We're going to talk about the DataIQ 100. What is it and why was it created?
Great question, Paul. People probably have some familiarity with it because we're quite noisy about it, and it actually has been around since 2014. And back then, there was a lot of noise about big data, and there was a lot of focus on the technology and the architecture required for organizations and companies to get their arms around their internal data and really start to maximize value from it. And what we realized was that that was going to require a group of leaders who were going to be able to engage with their businesses and really speak to why that was a good thing to do. It wasn't just an investment into infrastructure, it was actually potentially going to be transformative. So we thought we should perhaps take a lead in beginning to recognize those individuals and their skills and just trying to promote them, give them a platform, give them visibility, and a sense of this is a new role. I mean, Chief Data Officer, which has been one of the main job titles that we focused on, didn't exist much before 2012. So we were trying to recognize it was coming into existence. There were these new opportunities, and what does that look like? So that's why we introduced it, and that's why we've continued with it, because it's still very much front and center in a lot of what organizations are trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating actually, me being in Colombo at the moment, because in the UK I think we're very used to the term, and even but here and other places around the world, I go to lots of places, the term, Chief Data Officer or is still very new. And it's a very new thought, and obviously, with the reach that DataIQ now has, it's actually springing out to places like this. So I've had conversations here about DataIQ and your reach now.
Oh well, thank you for spreading word. Because I have to be honest, Asia Pacific is a region we haven't yet focused on. It is in our roadmap. We started in 2014 through to about 2020, we were very much UK and then a little bit of Europe, and now we have two versions. Yeah. So we have Europe and we have North America. Asia Pacific, at the moment, we don't have much coverage of because we don't have a footprint as a business. That's not to say you're meeting people out there. That it's a growing role, a growing need. It will come.
Yeah. So. Back to the DataIQ 100, how do you go about the process of selecting individuals? You kind of alluded to it earlier on, but how do you actually go through the process of selecting people?
Well, it's a good moment to be talking about this actually, because end of last year, to create this year's list, we made a big change in that process. So the thing that hasn't changed, anyone can nominate themselves. So actually nominations are open right now. They're open right through to November the 5th. 2025. It's free to enter. So anyone who's in a senior data analytics AI leadership role can put themselves forward for consideration. What we did previously was we had a set of questions that we asked everyone to complete as part of that nomination process. And we then sat and read all of those nominations.
Uh,
When I say
I'm sure
we,
it
I mean,
took quite a long time.
yeah, and when I say we, I mean me. Right? This was very much my role, and of course it's fascinating. Gave us a really rich insight into those individuals, but it was very subjective on both sides. It was people presenting, the best view of themselves, and me trying to understand the extent to which that was a genuine perspective on their achievements. And that wasn't a bad approach, but it wasn't also objective and measurable, and didn't perhaps support some of our other ambitions to really get a better fix on what is a data office and what is it that these individuals are going to be leading. So the big change we made was in the first stage of nomination on the form is we're asking a lot of quasi-demographics about their data office. What's the head count? What are the capabilities? What's the focus? Which stakeholders are you supporting? And that allows us, through a little bit of weighting, a little bit of a formula, to apply a score at that stage to everyone who nominates themselves. And then we go and do a bit more desk research against that list and say, okay, what kind of footprint have these people got? Are they very active speakers? Are they on councils and committees? Do we see them at our events? Are they perhaps one of our subscribers? And we add a little bit more to their score to reflect that.
Yeah.
And that's making quite a big difference in two ways. Firstly, it gives us the opportunity to genuinely compare someone who's in a senior data role in a small organization, but where they could be having a big impact, with someone who's in a large organization. Because we look at things like the ratio of headcount or the focus and the maturity and their reporting lines. And it doesn't mean that we exclude anyone who's small or only look at people who are large. We're able to compare like for like. And then it gives us, this incredible data set that we can do other reports with.
I was going to ask you. I mean, you must, through that new data that you're collecting, be able to understand the key leadership traits that are emerging within the industry, and are there any changes in that leadership trait or those leadership traits that you've seen over a period of time?
Yeah, Paul, I think we're at one of those inflection points. So, when we started, it was very much in the moment of big data. That term, it's not used as much. It's still out there a little bit, but that effort to really centralize and aggregate all the data that an organization was responsible for. Where we're at now, I think, with especially the arrival of AI, but also with markets that are softer, with challenges, in global trade, all the things that we're seeing happening more widely, is that what data is being asked to do, the decisions it's being asked to support, is shifting. And so the type of approach, the type of leadership skills that required up until the last couple of years were more technical. They were more about building and maturing a data office as a function, as an internal function. And now I think the focus is a lot more on how can we support something that's genuinely transformative? How we enable an AI-first strategy? What is the understanding that as a CDO, CDAO, whatever the term might be, what is your understanding of the business and the enabling pillars that it needs to have that will bring to fruition those business strategies, help to realize the purpose of the organization? And as part of that, I think we're seeing a little bit of a shakeout of some of those earlier generation of CDOs. There's been a lot of pressure on that role certainly in Europe and the US, where there's been a bit of a land grab by CIOs to say, well, actually, it's data, that's tech, isn't it? I'll take over the tech stuff. What does that leave a CDO or CDAO with? It should be the strategic positioning of data. It should be the enablement of AI. It should be the transformative, where are the new markets, what are the new processes that we can support with that. We're not fully there yet, of course, because it is a moment of transition.
Well, I think that I mean, I've had several meetings out here over the last couple of days, and for me, data is the glue that holds everything together.
Good way of
But
describing
but
it. Yeah.
but data without purpose is meaningless. So that transformation, you need the strategy in place. You need to be able to go, okay, well, how are we going to use this to drive the business, drive the business forward? If you don't have that connection between the strategy and the data that you're collecting, the two things are kind of left floundering.
Yes, that's exactly right, Paul. And it's one of the questions we ask in the nomination form is about proximity to the C-suite, because what that indicates is the ability to have that strategic influence, to be saying to the business, okay, if your ambition is this, you're going to need to do these things with your data estate, with the platforming, with the skill set, with the data literacy of the business as a whole,
Yeah.
to make that happen. Because
Yeah.
how we operate now won't necessarily support that. And of course, unless you're in the room, in those meetings, when those decisions are being made, that voice of data, that connection of the data strategy to the business strategy won't happen.
Yeah.
And that's why we ask that question, to see whether we're seeing a rise or a fall in that proximity and therefore the ability to influence. And of course, for the leaders themselves, it's a set of skills which it depends on your background. You know, if you studied business, if you've done an MBA, you can probably learn the data stuff. But if what you studied was computer science, it's much harder to understand how business operates and how
And how
leaders
to apply it. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
and you know that business decision making is complex, it's political, it doesn't always just follow what the numbers say.
yeah. But you have said it yourself, I think, in DataIQ in the past, that the ability to tell a story and the storytelling is critical,
Yes.
because you've got to bring the data to life. And I think that proximity to the boardroom, the closer you are to the boardroom, the closer you are to bringing the story that data can tell to life for the business.
Well, absolutely. And remember, in the boardrooms are crowded. There's a lot of people there. They have a lot of decisions to make, a lot of information to review. And often it's a matter of a couple of minutes that you get to really tell that story, to land that program, that objective, or even that objection to something. And that's why those storytelling skills and that ability to influence are, really critical. The closer you get, it's about letting go of the hands-on number crunching and holding on to, if this really is the plan, give me these resources, and I will then enable that for this part of the organization. It's understanding those trade-offs and those, even those transactional commitments that you have to make. If you give me this, I will do this.
Yeah, I think you've kind of referenced it, but it's that commercial acumen, isn't it, to join the dots between, if you give me this, I will do this, but this is what the benefit is going to be to the business, and be very clear about the business case. And so the commercial, I loved what you said about kind of the MBA background, and then someone who's a computer scientist. There are a lot of organisations now I see, training organisations that are helping people understand the transition from one thing to the other, and in between both.
Yeah, and I've been running a course called the Academy for Future Leaders, and we have a module in that called Business Literacy. And what's interesting is, before that module, I will research what is in the annual reports and accounts for the organisations who are in those sessions, and talk to the students about what the chairman is saying, what the CEO is saying, and what the numbers are saying, and if it references data or AI. And what's surprising is how often that is a surprise to them, that they actually don't look at their own company's websites from within the perspective of data, where they may well be getting call outs, as one of the enabling pillars, but they didn't know that. So I think that that's part of just a basic skill. I think that everyone in the realm of data is necessarily going to have to acquire is keep looking at what your business is talking about, what its ambitions are, and then think about what's your role in that? How are you supporting it? How are you translating that into an action you can take as an analyst, or data quality terms, or whatever it might be, to support that progress and that goal? But if you don't read that stuff, you won't know what the asks are going to be.
Yeah, it's good. You're making me smile, because I actually once a quarter get out an old presentation that I keep on updating, which has the pictures of all of the CEOs of the businesses that we work with,
Right.
and has some key stats on those businesses. And I asked the team to name the CEOs,
Yeah.
and to kind of give me some reflection on the key statistics in the business. And it's I present it to decision scientists and analysts and data engineers. If we don't know the end client and what they're trying to achieve, you can't influence and you can't understand the context. The context is so important to understand. When you're presenting to a board and you've got 2 minutes, you need to understand the pressure points of everyone in the room.
That's absolutely right, and you do that from the perspective of being a business partner. But that's really what the data office is now. It is a business partner to the organisation that it sits within. Whether you are internal or external in providing that support, you're absolutely right. You need to know who you are facing into, what their issues and concerns are, the pressures perhaps that they're under. And data is a great lens for that. It's often the only place where you can actually understand the business end to end, because data flows right across the majority of organizations. There are still some who are playing catch up, but essentially without data you can't achieve much these days.
Yeah, there's some that still keep it in shoe boxes.
Yeah, you still hear about those. Yeah.
Yeah. So, kind of looking forward, and you're going through the process right now of looking at the 100 for the future and for the coming year. What would you be saying to the future leaders? What would you be saying to the people who are coming into the industry right now, and what skills they need to develop in order to be the leaders of tomorrow?
So just following on from what we were discussing right now, I think there's this really important question about the mandate that a CDO and the data office has from the organization. What exactly is it going to be asked to do? And that's kind of in play a little bit, because I mentioned about the land grab by CIOs wanting to take the infrastructure stuff. And of course, there's the question about generative AI and agentic AI and where that sits. Now, without AI quality data, those agents can go rogue very fast. So one of the mandates that anyone leading on data should be looking for is, if you want to build those models, those domain-specific models that will really drive the organization, I need to be at the center of that. Now, I don't necessarily have to have a fancy title or a status, but I have to be in those meetings, and I have to have the mandate to say, actually, that won't work without this, and give me the resources to make that happen. It's very easy to spend the money on licensing the models, the cloud platform to spin them up in, the ongoing costs of inference. But all of that will not return value unless the data is right. And the definition of what that data is now is, we've long talked about unstructured data. Well, we're now talking about, everything, video, social media posts, everything that's on the website, everything is data, and anything could prove to be valuable to an agent or to a Gen AI model that you want to spin up. So the second part, as well as seeking the mandate, is to broaden the perspective of the types of data that you anticipate working with, managing, and running through governance processes. Because governance has never been more important. It's an old school skill of CDOs, but it's also a new school skill because AI can get you into trouble very fast if you don't get the governance piece right. So it's a challenging blend of the historical skills that got us to where we are now. They're still important, plus the political skills to position data in the right place, in the right way for the organization. Now, how do you do that? I think maybe there will be more movement both within organizations and between organizations until someone gets into that leadership role. I think exposure to more areas of activity, more demands, more requirements will be really useful, sort of Z-shaped rather than a straight linear progression.
Yeah, I guess one of the skills, given what you've just said, is it is not feeling too overwhelmed by all of the data, but also the ability to context switch, especially if you're a leader in the data space, is your ability to be able to jump from one thing to another across the organization, because you might be talking to HR versus supply chain and kind of your ability to understand the different pressure points across the business, and also prioritization's got to be key as well.
And prioritization is really difficult when you've got every part of the business shouting their demands at you, which is where having some fix on the value creation and using that as a metric really matters. But again, unless you've received that mandate and therefore the right to say no, or you've built strong stakeholder relationships so you can explain to them, you can't have it this month, but in 6 months' time, it'll be there because we have to do these other things first. That might be some infrastructure, or it might be more urgent, more priority actions for other stakeholders. Context switching, is important. It's hard work, right? I think there's a sense in which we felt maybe the role of the CDO was to bring to this perfect state of stasis the data estate. It was going to be perfectly architected, ideal,
structured.
Structured. You can answer any query that came in, and it would just hum along. And unfortunately, we've discovered that that's impossible. So you're constantly arbitraging between different facets of the tech demands, the business demands, the human demands. Just having the right people in the right seats in the data office is hard, because the skill set it's evolving very, very fast. Not least with the impact that Gen AI is going to have within the data realm itself.
Yeah, it's already having quite a significant impact.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, core skills for the last 10, 12 years of, for example, business intelligence, if you're now able to query a set of data in natural language, possibly even using voice commands, that's enabled by some of the systems out there, as long as you've got the data governed and managed in the right way, why do you need a BI analyst?
Yeah, you're just, for years I've been talking about what are the questions the businesses are trying to answer. Those questions are actually pretty stable, depending on where the organisation sits, and it's, just being able to punch it into an internal AI tool and ask the question of the business. Give me all the case studies we've ever done.
Well, exactly right. But of course, then that begins to surface more complex things. So, I was running a round table earlier this week talking about self-service and how to drive that. And one of the issues that comes out of that is, well, how far do you take that? So it's fairly easy to enable people with, some of those visualization tools and dashboards, and they can even drill down a little bit. But what if they want to start building some models for themselves? And what if they want to start sharing them back to the business? What if they want to bring in some other data that hasn't gone through the governance and quality processes? What if even they want to plug in a new tool because that appeals to them? How far do you take self-service, and what's the impact if you go all the way through to that end point? Is there still a governable, value-creating landscape that you can say, as a CDO, I've got my arms around this, or even as a CIO, I'm in control? Or does it start looking chaotic and dangerous? And I'm not sure it's easy to answer that question when you're, edging towards, we're seeing it with Copilot and ChatGPT, etc. Just those tools and the impact they're having on the type of work and type of questions that the business wants to ask is dramatic.
Yes, it's completely transforming and I guess within that, my last question for you is kind of, what do you see the future leaders, the skill sets of the future leaders needing to be? I mean, we talked about data and AI and context switching and those things, but I mean, it's going to get even more complicated.
It is. I think for all the emphasis I've been placing on the political and business skills, I do think there is still going to be a core of understanding of what data is and how you deal with it within a business context. That will be important. Otherwise, there is no such thing as a data office or a data function, right? There is something distinctive about it that's not the technology play. It's about the data that's required, how you shape and manage and deliver that out to the business in response to what your stakeholders are asking for. So there's a set of data skills, I think, that are still important and valuable to understand in order to enter into this space to begin with. Across the top of that, of course, then comes the domain understanding, whether, you see your career in financial services, banking, insurance, or retail or whatever. That matters too, because the questions you're going to be responding to, the actions and decisions that you're supporting are very specific and will have, a whole layer of either regulations or market issues, supply chain issues associated. So I think that increasing need to have an awareness of the sector and of the business itself is the forward path. Because if you develop that, it will naturally grow, I think, your political skill set as well. Because you'll start to understand, what is it that makes this bank that I work in different from that bank over there, or this retail organization, or this supply chain and logistics business. How are we different? How are we the same? And how am I working to, drive all of that forward? So I think, just going back to that business literacy piece, knowing who the CEO is, reading the reports and accounts, your quarterly check-in with your teams, it's a really great thing to do and to respond to. If you're in early mid-career, really engage with that and come back and say, do you know what, I think we're ahead, right? I think we're in leadership position here, but there's this challenge arising for us right now.
It's interesting you mentioned the financial data. I mean, I still do talk to financial services institutions and talk to them about their data, and sometimes I'm belittling the data by going, well, it's time, date, value,
Right.
location. It's got all of these stamps in it that are consistent across the financial services businesses that we work with.
Yeah.
But actually, what they're doing with it is very different depending on the strategy of the business and depending on the size and scale of the customer base as well. So the values or the data topics might be completely different, but the underlying data is exactly the same.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that was the point I was making. There is there's that consistency of actually what data is, right? And sure, we've got new cache, we've got streaming data, we've got unstructured data, but even those things, there are approaches, there are commonalities wherever you may work. So I think being able to grasp those is important. And then, to what you're saying just now, of course, understand how the business wants to leverage that to get competitive advantage. Because after all, that's why they started investing in data, way back in the 2010s, 2011 onward.
Yeah. So, David, thanks very much. That's the main body of what we're going to talk about today. But is there anything you would like to say to the audience about the DataIQ 100?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I mentioned right at the start, nominations are open. They're open till November the 5th. We are always keen to see people putting themselves forward, making the case for why they should be considered. By the way, it's not just the data we collect. There is a thing, there is a question saying, why, what have you been achieving for your organisation? So do find that form on our website. Do have a go. We are very objective now, as I outlined in how we look at people. And even if you don't make the final list, you are helping to inform the industry, because we are taking that data forward into reports that allows everyone to sense check where that at, whether that's in the scaling of the data office, the leadership perspective that they take, business issues that they're facing into. So, be a part of the community, the data community, through that lens. It's valuable to everybody, but you have a chance of actually making it to this list. And all modesty aside, I think it can have a positive impact internally for people in terms of their careers, and externally for getting recognition. So give it a go. It's free.
Thanks so much, David, for joining us. What's clear from our conversation and from the DataIQ 100 is that the modern data leader isn't just building pipelines or dashboards. They're influencing culture, shaping strategy, and driving value from the boardroom to the front line. As businesses continue to mature their data capability, it's these hybrid traits, curiosity, clarity, courage, that separate the good from the great. If you're listening from a data team or leadership role yourself, it's worth asking, how well are you set up, not just to manage data, but to lead with it? That's it for this episode of Tyfano. Until next time, keep putting data to work. Thanks.